Welcome to another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. I am your host, Lamont Gates, once again bringing you the world of faith, metaphysicality, and spirituality. Today, my guest encountered a type of love in her near-death experience that was incomparable to any kind of love one can find here in the earthly realm. Joining me today, ladies and gentlemen, is near-death experiencer Sonia St. Clair. Sonia, welcome to Real Spiritual Talk Radio.
Thank you. Thank you, Lamont.
Absolutely glad to have you here. You know, it took a little time to get this interview process going. You're all the way in Australia. I'm all the way in the United States of America. But once again, I thank you for coming on. Now, Sonia, before we get into your near-death experience, I understand that it kind of blew you away, the experience itself, in terms of how much love you experienced. Is that so?
Oh, most definitely. The love on the other side is there are no words for it. Absolutely no words. It's beyond mankind's realm of thinking, the love that's on the other side. And with all the volumes of dictionaries in this world, there is not one word to describe it. Absolutely none.
It is
It's
absolutely
something.
fascinating.
Mm.
Indeed. And we'll get right into that. But before we do, why don't we talk a bit about your past religious upbringings, if there were any? Were there any religious or spiritual belief systems you held prior to your near-death experience?
Oh, wow, that is a loaded question. I was raised in a Catholic orphanage from five of them, in fact, from the age of 3 months old to 14. So I was indoctrinated very much so into the Catholic religion. I was taught about a revengeful God, a fearful God, someone to fear, someone to always be worried about, because if you committed a sin, you'd go to hell or you'd go to purgatory. I was raised as a little girl on my knees every day, being terrified if I did die, what would happen to me? I was so afraid of hell and limbo, and God was so awful and so unmerciful. And I didn't know what to believe. Well, I believed them because I was being brainwashed for 14 years with the Catholic religion. And what I found was how unmerciful they were, how violent they were, how abusive they were, and what they were preaching didn't marry up to their behaviour. So I spent a lot of years on my knees praying the rosary, praying all kinds of prayers to be good so I would go to heaven. When I had to go to confession every week as a 7-year-old, I didn't know what to say in confession, because if you didn't say you were naughty in some way, they would then report you to the nuns and then you'd get a hiding. So I used to pretend and make up lies of how bad I was because I didn't want to get into trouble. So I was so confused. And so very much indoctrinated into the Catholic religion before I had my NDE. And
Very
I don't
fascinating.
believe in religion anymore. There's no way I believe in any religion.
Right, correct. So, in other words, you were raised to have faith in a fear-based religion, which you noted just now was run by people who were hypocritically following the so-called religion that they were trying to indoctrinate you with.
That's exactly right. They were hypocrites. They had set themselves up as a deity to be feared, to be respected and revered, and yet they were none of that. None of that at all. They were most ungodlike. And what I feared the most was when they were coming after you, you could hear the beads rattling from their rosary beads that hung off their belts around their waist. And when I heard those, I used to run and hide in my locker because I knew what would happen if they got you. So I lived a very fearful life of them and of God. And yet, when I was 7, I used to have my own telepathic conversation with God from the age of 7. So I knew what they were telling me. was so different to what I was being told by this statue on the landing in the orphanage that struck me when I was 7 years old and first went into this particular orphanage. There was a beautiful statue of our Lord, Jesus, God, whatever you want to call him, standing on a pedestal as the nun was dragging me through to the dormitory. And I was absolutely awestruck by this figure. And it almost came alive. I mean, I was 7. And I was already orphan weary from 7 years of being in orphanages already. And this figure just struck me of how kind he was, how beautiful he was. It was like he came alive. And I used to love this figure and I loved this statue, and it was immediate and just so beautiful. And what I was being taught by them and the way I was being raised and the violence that they used against us, me and my twin sister, and of course all the other children in there as well, it just did not make sense to what I was hearing and seeing with this beautiful statue on this pedestal on the landing in the orphanage. So I was very confused, but I knew what they were telling me was just not right at all. Absolutely wrong.
And with that said, why don't we move into your near-death experience? But first and foremost, why don't you describe to us what triggered your near-death experience to actually occur?
It was medical neglect again by the nuns. I had suffered for 2 days with acute appendicitis. I was very febrile. I was in a lot of pain. I was bent over. I could hardly walk. I was 14 years old. They wouldn't call the doctor, wouldn't call an ambulance, and wouldn't let me go to the hospital, which was at the end of the street that the orphanage was on. So my twin sister took me by the hand and she walked me to the hospital. And halfway to the hospital, that was when my appendix burst. And all of a sudden, within an instant, I was completely out of my body and I was up in the light. And the light was God, and you knew he was God by his love. And I was immersed in it, absolutely surrounded by it, enveloped by it. And the love was just so pure, the purest love of all of any kind. And I knew I was home and I knew I was where I belonged. And we had telepathic conversations, but even though the conversations were telepathic, you really didn't need them because you sort of knew in advance what the conversation was anyway. If that makes any sense at all. You just know, you have such a powerful awareness that you don't have on this earth. You just know what's going to happen. You know what's being said. You know the love that's there, and you just cannot help but respond to the love that is there. And in his eyes, you are perfect. You are beautiful. You are not disabled. Nothing hurts. And you are no one's child that's not wanted. There's no rejection. There's nothing like that in heaven. And what I discovered while I was with God was that all he wants from us is to love one another, be kind to one another, and help one another. That's all he wants. We don't need all this stuff that's going on in the world right now. We really don't. If people could just spend a minute asking someone how they are and if they're okay, and then actually listen and respond to what they're saying rather than, oh yes, well, I have to go now. You know, like, we don't have time for anyone anymore. And that's the sad part about it. There's just no time for anyone.
Now, while you were there, you mentioned hearing telepathic conversations. What in general did you hear other than being kind to one another, loving one another? Did you hear anything else?
I didn't hear a whole lot. Mainly the conversation for me was about love. It was all about love. Some people have different experiences where they're fearful, but for me it wasn't. I was only 14, so I was very naive with life and everything else. But to me, his conversation was all about love. And because I had never experienced love in the physical world and didn't recognize it, or even I never heard the word love either. So I really didn't know anything about it at all. But I knew when I was with God what love meant. And when you're with him, love really is beautiful when you know what it means. And I knew so much what it meant when I was with him. And that was the main conversation with me, that love is what makes the world go round. Love is what heals everything. And if everyone in the world was kind and loving to one another, we would not need prisons, hospitals, wars, police, military, nothing. That's the power of love, and that's what it does. So we have to look at this world and think to ourselves, well, where are we and how did we get here? That's what we need to think.
You talk about entering a place of light. Were you just surrounded by lights the entire time you were having this experience, or was there any other visual optics going on for you?
I was in the light and I was under the light. It was like I was in a dome. There was sort of space between me and God the Father. Not that I saw him in form, but you knew it was him and he was there. And I would say it would be like a dome. I was under the dome and there was space between me and him, yet the dome and the light was him. Very hard to explain and make sense of that. But yes, absolutely enveloped by light, white light, nothing like white on earth at all.
So what was it like coming back from this experience into your body? I know the last thing you recalled was going into the hospital when you probably most likely collapsed with your sister. How did you awaken from this?
I woke up in hospital after surgery. According to the doctors, they reported the nuns and told my sister I would have been dead within about 20 minutes. And the doctors saved my life that day. And when I woke up, I was in pain again from the surgery, physical and emotional pain from orphanage life. And I was so disappointed to be back on earth. Absolutely disappointed. I wasn't told you must go back. I wasn't told it's not your time. I was just there. But I knew from my NDE and from the age of 7 that my life would be a very difficult one, and well into my adulthood. I just knew. Without even the telepathic conversation, just the awareness of the conversation to be had. And that's exactly how my life has panned out. And we all have a purpose. And what I think my purpose is to try and help people or inform people, especially people who have suffered trauma, that they are loved very, very much. They are special and they are worth more, absolutely worth more. And that they have a purpose as well. And sometimes we don't know what our purpose is. Do we have a big purpose, a small purpose? Sometimes just saying one word or a sentence to somebody could literally save their life. And then that ripple effect flows on for them as well to other people. And you don't even know what you've done. So sometimes we don't even know what our purpose is, but we all have one. And we're all important and we're all special. And this is what I want to get across to people who might be feeling low or angry or sad because of their life and their childhood, that there is more. a whole lot more, and that they are so very much loved. That's what I would, that's what I think I came back for. And also forgiveness. I also forgave everyone because when you forgive, it releases you from the fear, the pain, the anxiety, and it allows you to draw on your strength so that you can live your life. Because when we're in anger and pain and suffering all the time and bad memories, then that draws on our weaknesses. And that's why I think forgiveness really is a major thing, that not everyone can forgive, and I understand that.
And what you're saying are is absolutely parallel to what many near-death experiencers talk about. They usually return saying that they're here to love more, to be kind more, to have more compassion, to have more mercy, to have more forgiveness, and that yes, their life does matter, and that yes, one or two words can make the difference in between someone taking their life or not taking their life. And you won't know that, of course. And I think that's the challenge with most of us. We don't know our power. We don't know the power of our words, whether negative or positive. So I'm glad you said what you said just now, because there is a ripple effect, whether we know it or not. We are making someone feel great, or we're making someone feel very low, as you felt while you were in that orphanage all of those years. Now, coming back from your near-death experience, after having this particular experience, did you tell anyone about it?
No, no, I never told anyone because my life was such a violent one growing up. There was a lot of abuse in the orphanages and in foster care where we used to go out for the school holidays. There was, well, you know what kind of abuse you usually have in foster care. There was all that kind of thing. And so I also grew up in an era where children were seen and not heard. And so I never used to speak to anyone. I was mute most of my life because to speak and to show yourself could mean a hiding. So I used to hide in my locker most of the time. And so I never told anyone. I never talked to anyone about it, not the doctors, not my mother, whom I used to see. No one, absolutely no one. I didn't talk about it until about probably 20 years ago. I'm 72 now. My near-death experience was at 14. So I was about 50 when I started talking about it and seeing about it online. And so I've never been one to really, you know, tell people my business. I've always been a private person. But now you can talk about things and people believe you as well. And but I don't care whether they believe me or not. I know what I saw, what I felt, and I have the confidence in that. But knowing others have the same thing and they experience that same love just makes me feel so good. And so yeah, I don't really go around talking about it except, well, I wrote online. I wrote online a little bit about it, and I got quite the response, which I couldn't believe. And one man said to me online, he said, when I wrote about my NDE and God's love, he said, "You don't know how much I needed to hear that today." And tears welled up in my eyes, and I knew straight away that he was suicidal. And if that story, by telling the story, that it can help people save a life, he might have been a father, a husband, he might have had 3, 4 kids, grandkids. And if he had taken his life, then what? The sadness that is left behind. So again, what near-death experience means to me is to really try and be kind to people, because everyone's suffering, everyone's having a bad day. Even people that have NDEs, you know, we know better, but some days, you know, it's not a good day. And a kind smile goes a long way, a hello. just letting people know that they're worthy and just acknowledging them, even if it's just for a moment or a second.
Yes, absolutely. And it goes back to what I stated earlier, what you also stated earlier, how those one words, in this case, the written word, made
Yes.
so much of the difference in that man's life.
Mm. Yes, exactly. There was actually a few sort of comments like that, and I thought, I, since my NDE, I'm very intuitive and what they call a sensitive. I'm very sensitive to people's feelings and thoughts and body language. And I just knew that he was suicidal. And there was a few other comments like that too. And I thought to myself, I think there's a lot of people that are very, very sad, and they go on these near-death experience sites maybe to gain some kind of hope and to let them know that there is more and there is a God and God does love them. And hope is very important, because while one draws breath, there is always hope, always hope. And I just try and let people know, never give up no matter what, no matter what, because, you know, sometimes these things make you stronger, so much stronger. You look at a tree that's weathered many storms and rain and what have you, it grows much stronger. Absolutely. So it's what you do with your pain and suffering that counts. You know, using it for good and trying to help others with the compassion that you've gained from your own suffering. And so if my little bit can help one person, then I guess I'm happy with that. I don't need to be on the world stage, you know, giving talks to millions of people about things, because just the ripple effect alone can help so many people. That's for sure.
Correct. And you spoke earlier about being sensitive. I want to talk now about any possible after effects that you may have come back with. Many near death experiencers describe coming back, for example, with precognition. Their empathy levels are much more higher. They lack a fear of death. Did you come back with anything remotely close to these?
Yes, very much so. And I have such, the problem is I have such empathy and compassion, it hurts me, because I literally feel what others are feeling. And I can just look at somebody and I know their complete story. I know what they're suffering and why. Don't ask me how I know this. I don't know how I know this, but I know. And I feel it. And it sometimes I have to watch my own emotions because of that, because it takes such energy. But yes, I have a lot of empathy and compassion. It's hard for me to watch the news and see how people are treating one another on the news and just in life in general. It saddens me so much that people can treat one another the way they do, because I have such an awareness of it. And instead of, you know, being nasty and aggressive and fighting and abusing and ruining people's reputations online and running down families and what have you, it's just all going in the wrong direction. Everything's getting worse and worse and worse. And I don't know where the love is anymore. And that saddens me too. Absolutely saddens me that, you know, we don't have the love and compassion in the world anymore that we used to have in the simple days like the 50s, you know. But yes, very, very strong, empathic. That's what I believe they call it. Very, very strong, empathic, hugely compassionate. And I do feel everyone's pain and sorrow. I really do. And I wish they didn't have to suffer that. But then sometimes we're given these crosses to bear for a reason. We really don't know quite why. But sometimes I feel that I had my life to to help me get to a better place in heaven. That's, if that makes sense, you know, get me to a higher place in heaven to feel God's love. Apparently there's different levels of love. Some people have a thimble full and they're so full, it's beautiful. And some people have a cup full, a jug full. And there's those kind of levels. So I think sometimes we take on crosses to bear and we don't realise that we're doing that because we've come to earth with that. And that's the way it is. But once we become physical, we really don't want that. No, I didn't sign up for this, but we did. And it's having the awareness and the knowing as to why we're doing that, yes.
So it sounds like you're talking a bit about premortal existence and contracts that many near-death experiencers describe.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. And some people become very upset, you know, why are babies dying? Someone wrote to me online the other day, then why does God allow babies to die and people to die of cancer? And I thought I have to be very sensitive to this lady. She's obviously very upset. And I just said to her, some of us are here for a long time. Some of us are here for a short while. And you'll understand when you go home. That's all I could say without, you know, being judgmental or critical in any way, because when people are down and sad like that, they don't need someone else to just, you know, hit them with something else. So, yes, we don't understand. And it's some people live unconscious lives and some people live conscious lives, and that can make a real difference.
Mm-hmm. Now, you spoke about something earlier about answering a lot of these Facebook posts on these near-death experience groups, and you noticed there were a lot of people coming in just wanting to hear more about what you're saying, and because they themselves, you got the feeling that they were down, sad, perhaps even suicidal. I personally think that a lot of people on those near-death experience group sites are non-experiencers who are looking for something greater. I think religion, as we spoke earlier, has kind of failed these people. A lot of them have come into contact with, as you have, the hypocritical leadership, the hypocritical voices, and they see one thing, but they hear something different out of them. But to hear someone have an actual experience in one of these heavenly realms and hear how much they're actually loved, despite what their religions have taught them in the past, I think their ears are now much more wide open to wanting to know more about these accounts and these experiencers such as yourself.
Yes, people have been failed very much let down by the churches, who a lot of them preach the fear of God and a revengeful God. And they're seeking and looking elsewhere because they're not in church. You're not taught about how much you are loved and being kind and being good. It's about fire and damnation and hell and all this kind of thing. People think they're suffering in this life and they're going to suffer in the next life. And the trouble with religion, it's man-made. It's not God-made at all. And I've been reading, I don't know how true it is, that an emperor, Justinian, was the emperor that actually put in the Bible, added to the Bible about fire, hell, and damnation. And he apparently added that, and he took something else out of the Bible that should have been there. Now, to me, the Bible is about controlling the masses. You look at the Catholic Church, you look at the Vatican, they're a country unto themselves. They live in such opulence while people are suffering. Their own people are suffering while they are so protected and living in the world that they live in. To me, that doesn't make sense. Jesus walked the earth and slept where he laid. Jesus wasn't living in a mansion and gold and it infuriates me that they live like that, and with what they're doing with the sexual abuse as well, with a lot of the nuns and the priests and the brothers, and yes, the nuns too. People don't like to hear that story. It sickens them. Well, it's true. And you take their robes off, and what have you got? You have mere mortals that set themselves up as godlike, to be adorned and thrown money at. All the Catholics, I don't know about other churches, they're giving money on the plates all the time and leaving their homes to the Catholic Church while they live in this opulence, and yet what are they doing for the people? And I'm sure they're not all the same. I'm sure there's some very nice, loving priests and brothers and nuns out there, but, you know, it just doesn't make sense to me how they treat humanity. That's what doesn't make sense to me. I just don't understand it.
And interestingly enough, many people who have had near-death experiences have tried to talk. One of the questions I asked you prior was, did you tell anyone about it? And you said no. A lot of people don't, immediately at least. But there have been cases where people have gone to their priest or to their pastor or to their religious authority and tried to tell them about these near-death experiences, and they were ultimately shunned by the very people who preach that there is a God, a loving God, a heaven, etc.
Yes, absolutely. Now, there's a movie I saw. I don't know if it was about a young boy or a young girl. I think it was about a young girl who had this terrible digestive problem. It's a movie, and she couldn't digest any food, and she was dying. She was in hospital. Anyway, she fell down inside a tree. Do you remember that movie? She fell down inside a tree and she died, and she had a near-death experience. Anyway, they tried telling their pastor, and people weren't believing. And I thought to myself, the churches preach about miracles, but when you tell them you've had a miracle, they don't believe you and make out you're a liar. See, that doesn't marry up either. So that tells me they're not living conscious lives, because they're not in that realm or space at all to even accept what this innocent child is saying. Now, a lot of people think children make stuff up, especially when it comes to sexual abuse. How do you know about that language and what this girl experienced when she went to heaven? How does she know about all that if she didn't experience it? And they're not believed. Children are not believed. And you're right, the pastor, the priest, they don't believe you when you say you've had a miracle. You know why? Because they think you're nothing but a sinner. And why would God give you a miracle? Because you're nothing but a sinner. You're less than. And that's what it's about. We are all judged. We are all put in boxes. You're this and you're that and you're that. So why would God be anything more to you than he is to me when I'm a high priest or I'm a nun or whatever? And so they're the ones living unconscious lives, because they're not even on that realm. They have no understanding, no compassion, no foresight or insight to even stop and listen to what that girl had to say. And she's not the only one.
And this is exactly why I do a show such as this one and bring on near-death experiencers. There are millions of them, virtually millions of them all across the world, 6 different continents, island nations. The research literature is abundant with cases that all parallel one another and
Yes.
pretty much put out there that what you stated earlier is true. Learning to love, learning to be more compassionate, learning to be more kind would make the world ultimately a much better place to live in.
If people want to know, what can we do then? I believe in the power of prayer. I say a little prayer every day. I send divine love, peace and healing to all mankind, Mother Earth and God, all God's creatures. And that covers everybody and everything. And I know that goes out into the world, that energy. And I also wrote a book called The Power of God and His Divine Messages, and it's on Amazon as an ebook. And that's very powerful about prayer and what prayer can do. And I don't mean being on your knees, saying the rosary all day and God, I'm a bad person, please forgive me, I'm so bad. No, no, you are so good. You know, you really are good and decent. You really are. You've just been hurt, that's all. And all we need to do is just say prayers. I send divine love, peace and healing to all mankind, Mother Earth and all God's creatures. And that's all you have to say, and talk to God in your own way to somehow try and help heal the world. And all our prayers collectively, you know, add up. They all add up. And that's all we can do. So the most powerful thing we can do for anybody is to pray for them. And you, as I said, you don't have to be on your knees all day doing it. You know, if I walk past a homeless person in the street, I send them divine love. I just say in my head, I send you divine love, peace and healing. Because but for the grace of God go I. And that's where I could have ended up. Actually, I've been homeless, escaping domestic violence with a baby. I've lived in bus sheds. I've lived in my car and escaping domestic violence. And I know what it's like, and I really feel for people, because people are there because they've not been loved. You get a baby and you love it and treat it so kindly and wonderful. It's not going to end up homeless on the street. Their self-esteem would be too high. It's all about a lack of love. That's where people are, because of a lack of love. And I wish somehow we could do more. I really do. And if anyone's watching this, just say a little prayer. It really does work and it helps. And on some level, they feel that. They really do.
Well, with
Yeah,
that said, you said a mouthful there, and again, I think with stories like yours and the millions and tons of other near-death experiencers out there sharing their accounts, I think there is enough to really cause some serious ripple effects in the world.
I hope so, Lamont. I really do.
And with that said, I want to thank you for coming on Real Spiritual Talk Radio and sharing with us your absolutely fascinating account.
Thank you, Lamont. I really appreciate you giving me this platform to try and help people as much as I can. And if I've said one word that can help anybody today, then I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful to you, and I appreciate you and what you're doing. So thank you very much.
Absolutely welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, Sonia St. Clair.